The air at Camp Verdant already shimmered by the time the clock struck 08:00. In the dry Arizona heat, a line of recruits stood shoulder to shoulder, rifles shouldered, optics gleaming. Their precision gear caught sunlight like mirrors, glass polished, rails spotless, suppressors freshly oiled. Range 9 was active, and no one wanted to be the one who missed in front of instructors. They had M110A1s with Night Force scopes, ballistics calculators mounted, wind meters clipped to their sleeves, all except for one. Olivia Boone stood at the far left, arms wrapped loosely around an M24. The stock showed signs of wear. The matte black faded into gray at the edges. Slung at her side was an old leather case. When she opened it, the hinge squeaked, and inside lay a tarnished brass spotting scope. Its finish was blotchy, green in some places. She adjusted the tripod and set it down. Heads started turning. A private near the middle of the line smirked. "That your dad's deer gun." Someone behind him laughed. "Looks like a museum dropped something." Another voice piped up. "You polish that thing with shoe grease or just spit on it." Even their squad leader, First Lieutenant Creighton, let out a chuckle under his breath. "Let's see what the antique can do." The steel silhouette target was set at 1,000 yards. Most recruits hadn't touched that distance yet. Olivia didn't speak. She laid prone, cradled the rifle, and adjusted her cheek weld. No kestrel, no laser rangefinder. Her eyes moved from a clump of desert brush to a faint shimmer on the horizon. She let the wind talk to her. A quick breath in, a slow exhale. Trigger slack, taken. The crack of the shot echoed long after the bolt cycled. 3 seconds passed, then a sharp ping rolled back across the range. Direct hit, bullseye, on her first round. The laughter stopped. The range was dead quiet. No one said anything, not even Creighton. A few turned to look, unsure what they'd just seen. Olivia stood, brushed dust from her elbows, and calmly reset the scope. Someone near the rear finally muttered, "Barely louder than the breeze." That wasn't luck. And just like that, the oldest scope on the line had taken the air out of the newest rifles. The sun had dropped low behind the range by the time Olivia made it back to her barracks. The metal frame of the bed creaked as she sat, unzipping her gear with a tired hand. Dust still clung to her sleeves, and her shoulders ached, but her focus had narrowed to the worn spotting scope resting in her lap. The brass was cool and weighty, carrying the kind of silence that felt earned, not empty. She took a soft cloth to the frame, running it along every seam with slow, deliberate strokes. Her thumb caught on a faint ridge near the eyepiece. Not a dent, not wear, but something deliberate. She tilted it toward the overhead light and found it. Tiny, almost invisible, unless you knew where to look. Letters etched deep into the inner ring. She read them aloud, barely whispering. Read the wind, not the noise. Her chest tightened. It wasn't just advice, it was him, her grandfather, Matthew Boone, Lieutenant Colonel, long retired, the man who never talked about the war, never bragged about medals, but always looked at the sky before he spoke. He'd given her this scope when she turned 14, saying only that it had seen some distance. She hadn't understood until now. At 09:30 the next morning, she was called to the command office. Captain Thomas Reeve sat behind a desk cluttered with training reports. His expression barely moved when she entered. She placed the scope on the desk as instructed. He didn't speak right away, just studied it, turning it slowly in both hands. When he found the inscription, his posture changed. Not visibly, just enough for her to notice the way his fingers stilled. He asked where she got it. She answered. His silence deepened. Then he spoke. "Pack your things. You're being reassigned to Fort Elk Shadow." He didn't offer explanation, only handed her a sealed folder and told her to be on the tarmac by 1600. That's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. As she left the office, the dry air outside felt heavier than it had the day before. Not hotter, just older. Something had shifted. She clutched the scope a little tighter, her boots scuffing the concrete like they were walking into something bigger than orders. The kind of bigger that ran in blood. The helicopter banked low over pine-covered ridgelines, then dropped into a clearing that looked more like a logging site than a military post. Olivia stepped out onto hard-packed gravel. The wind from the rotors slapped her jacket as the aircraft lifted away. Ahead, beyond a single checkpoint, stretched rows of camouflaged structures half buried in the terrain. No signs, no flags, just quiet. A man waited at the gate. His uniform was regulation, but faded at the edges. His name tape read, Kessler. The scar on his left cheek said more than the stripes on his sleeve. Master Sergeant Alan Kessler didn't speak until she was within arm's length. He looked at the case, slung over her shoulder, then at her face. Congratulations. You've arrived where skill begins and reputation dies. He walked her through a narrow corridor between buildings, the concrete silent beneath their boots. He talked without turning. Ravenmark isn't about rifles. It's about knowing when not to fire. You're here because someone thinks you can learn that. I don't care who your grandfather was. Earn your place or get recycled out. Olivia didn't reply. She kept pace and listened. At the ready house, 4 other candidates waited. Raiden leaned against a steel beam, arms crossed, his smirk already loaded. Aaron sat cross-legged, eyes tracking everything. Kyle checked over a case of optics, labeling parts under his breath. Leo stood off to the side, watching shadows, not people. Kessler stopped beside them and faced the group. You're here because you did something most don't. That ends today. No one cares about your past. Not bloodlines. Not awards. You will earn every inch of ground under your boots. One of you won't last the week. His eyes paused on Olivia just long enough for her to notice. Then he turned and walked out, without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. The room stayed silent. Outside, wind moved through the trees like something waiting to speak. The sun climbed over the ridge just as the teams reached the valley range. Olivia lay prone in the dry grass, the brass scope already adjusted and braced. Around her, the others called out wind readings from kestrels and checked ballistic calculators on mounted tablets. Numbers flew, charts updated. Kessler gave no feedback. He simply called distance and moved down the line. At 700 meters, Raiden went first. He hit 2 out of 3. Aaron followed with tight grouping. Kyle overcompensated and missed his 3rd. Olivia's turn came. She didn't ask for readings. She watched the shimmer above the ground, tracked the movement of a single blade of grass bending sideways, and inhaled slow. Her M24 barked once. Steel rang. 1 hit, then 2, then 3. Kessler said nothing, but the silence behind him spoke enough. As the range stretched to 1,100 meters, others started questioning her. No electronics, no spotter data. She shrugged, read the air. It's all there if you're quiet enough. By the time they reached 1,300, no one laughed. Her 3rd round struck center mass with barely a whisper of recoil. That night, Olivia sat on her bunk and unscrewed a worn brass cap on the scope. Inside, wedged against the frame, was a folded scrap of canvas, aged and inked by hand. She laid it flat. Thin curves and symbols marked wind patterns like a topographical map of the sky. At the bottom corner, M. Boone. Kessler walked by, paused, then stepped inside. He looked down at the chart, eyes narrowing. That's mountain work, he said. Raven Ridge. Probably. Your grandfather mapped it during a 5-day sit. We thought it was lost. His voice didn't rise, but something shifted behind it. Respect, maybe, or memory. He turned to leave. Use it well. That's not a relic. That's a record. Then he was gone. Olivia folded the map carefully and placed it back in the scope. She didn't smile. She didn't have to. The others had data. She had memory, and it spoke louder in the quiet. At 0320, they were pulled from their racks with no warning, no lights, no briefing, just orders to gear up and move. The air outside the barracks bit cold against their faces, the forest ahead black and quiet. Each recruit was handed a bolt-action rifle with 0 electronics, no optics, no thermals, no night vision, just iron sights and instinct. They hiked in silence through the tree line until they reached a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. Kessler's voice was a low growl under the wind. 3 targets, thermal plates, half buried, range between 500 and 800 meters. You'll hear them before you see them. 1 shot per target. No second chances. Listen. Raiden went prone first. Fired before he was even settled. Missed the first. Clipped the second. Completely missed the third. Aaron did better. Catching 1 clear hit. Kyle didn't register anything. Leo adjusted well, but his grouping was loose. The cold had everyone rattled. Then, Olivia stepped forward and lay flat. Elbows settled into the pine needles. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. The forest pressed in around her, thick with damp bark and frozen soil. She closed her eyes for 1 full breath and let the world talk. Wind brushed the treetops on her left. A distant owl shifted its tone. The dry snap of heat against frost echoed near the lowest target. She lifted the rifle, aligned based on the sound and faint distortion. 1 shot. The ping was clean. Target down. She adjusted slightly. Waited again. Heard another hiss, higher on the ridge. Fired. Second target struck. The third took longer. She rolled her shoulders slightly, felt the air change against her face. The shot rang out, and the final plate responded with a muted clang. Kessler didn't clap. He didn't nod. He just moved on. But the silence that followed was louder than any praise. The others watched her from the dark, and the forest didn't speak again. It didn't have to. Back in the barracks just after 4:30 a.m., Olivia sat at her desk, still layered in sweat and earth. The rest of the recruits were asleep or pretending to be. Her fingers moved slowly across the brass scope, tracing edges worn smooth from time and weather. Something in its weight felt uneven. She turned it over, tapped beneath the eye ring, then heard the soft click of shifting metal. A second seam gave way. She slid open the compartment and found a notebook, yellowed and soft, bound in leather so faded it looked gray under the single lamp bulb. Across the cover, written in black ink barely holding on, were 4 words, "The Hush Protocol." She opened it gently. The inside was filled with diagrams sketched by hand. Not perfect, not polished, but exact. Wind gradients, elevation shifts, mental drills. Between them were notes that read more like thoughts than instructions. Stillness before the shot isn't just physical. It's emotional. Breath is where noise begins. And then 1 sentence that stopped her cold. Silence doesn't mean absence. It means control. Her eyes stayed on that line. Something about it felt heavier than any round she had ever chambered. She flipped through more pages, each marked with field notes in pencil, some smeared by water or time. There was something human in the ink, something lived in. It wasn't theory. It was survival, written by a man who had seen the edge and made his peace with it. She didn't hear the door open. Kessler stood behind her, eyes on the page. He didn't ask permission, just leaned forward and looked once. That line. Boone wrote it after Pakistan. He said, "Ambush broke down the comms. They were pinned." He stayed calm when no one else did. Then he stepped back, hands in his pockets. Olivia closed the notebook slowly, holding it in both hands. It felt like memory. Yes, but also instruction. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The protocol wasn't about being quiet. It was about being sure. At 0610, the recruits were lined up on Ridge 9, where the ground fell away in long, uneven stretches toward the tree line. The wind had picked up just after dawn, and a front was pushing in from the west. Kessler stood with his arms crossed, eyes narrowed against the light rising off the valley. Today's target was a 3-foot steel plate at 2.5 kilometers. No elevation advantage, no digital support, just glass, grit, and 3 rounds. Raiden went first. He took his position, made fast adjustments, and fired. His first round hit low and right. The second struck near the edge. The third missed altogether. He cursed quietly, stood, and stepped away. Erin followed. Slower, more calculated. Her grouping was tighter, but only one hit center. Kyle's first shot missed entirely, his scope fogging at the edge. Leo managed a decent spread, 1 round dead center, the other 2 off by inches. Then it was Olivia's turn. She stepped forward and unrolled the faded strip of silk from her scope pouch. The fabric fluttered in the breeze as she pinned it beside her. It was old, marked with loops and notes, barely legible unless you knew how to read it. She lay prone, leveled the rifle, and let her breathing steady. Kessler gave a subtle signal. Begin. She studied the trees at mid-slope, saw how the pine needles swayed differently in pockets. Heat shimmer rolled low along the rocks. Dust lifted in soft curls. She didn't look at the others. She listened. Let the valley speak. The first shot cracked. The echo bounced before the sound of steel came back, sharp and solid. A hit. She paused. Felt the change. The wind had shifted by 0.5 meter per second to the left. Low pressure along the south tree line. She made a slight correction. Second shot. Another solid ring. The third was hardest. The valley went still. No movement. She watched a single raven gliding near the cliffs, banking just slightly on the drop. She followed that arc with her breath. Fired. Steel rang again, deeper this time. Textbook center. No one clapped. No one moved. Kessler stepped forward, checked the spotting scope, then looked down the valley through his own glass. He didn't say a word, just nodded once, and walked away. Olivia sat up slowly. Her pulse had slowed too. She packed the silk map carefully and slid it back into her pouch. The others didn't speak, but they watched. Not with envy, not with suspicion, with something quieter, like respect. That was the hush, not silence, control. The rotors of the MH-47 Chinook thundered low through the valleys of Helmand Province, slicing midnight air with controlled fury. Inside the dark belly of the bird, Olivia sat against the wall, her rifle braced upright between her boots. The brass scope lay secured in foam beside her. They had departed at 23:00 sharp, or 11 p.m., from an unnamed forward operating base. Now, over enemy terrain. The lights stayed off. No talking. Just the hum of adrenaline and the muted rustle of gear checks. The insertion zone was narrow. Dust kicked up hard as the Chinook flared above a rocky slope, no more than 60 seconds on the ground. The team moved fast. 5 operators, each assigned. Olivia and her spotter, Leo, climbed east along the ridge toward the designated overwatch site. The wind cut cold against the slope. Thin air. Steep terrain. They reached their hide just past 0130. Below, the compound sat walled in stone, built like a fortress against the hillside. Guard towers framed the corners. A single courtyard faced northeast, barely visible except under starlight. Olivia adjusted her scope and unfolded the silk map on a flat patch of rock. Leo whispered wind speeds as he checked the kestrel, but she was already feeling the shifts. The distance was confirmed. 2,700 meters. They had trained for this. She had trained for this. At 0205, the target emerged. He wore dark robes, shoulders broad, beard thick with gray. Hamid Baran, a known architect of embassy bombings. He stepped into the courtyard alone. Olivia took up position. The wind was steady, slightly pulling left across the valley. She aligned her cheek, took slack from the trigger. Then the door behind him opened again. A child ran into view, barefoot, no older than 6, chasing a ball. Olivia's finger froze. Her breath hitched. The boy stopped near Baran, looked around, and kicked the ball. Leo whispered, "Still a shot." No movement behind him. Olivia didn't answer. She waited. 10 seconds? Then 20. The boy turned and darted back through the door. It closed quietly. Barren remained. She adjusted half a click for a sudden lift in thermal current. Inhaled. Exhaled. Her mind went still. She heard nothing but the hush. The shot cracked into the dark. 3 full seconds later, the steel core round struck clean through the target's chest. Baran dropped where he stood. No shout. No siren. The courtyard remained still. Leo confirmed it with a whisper. "Target down." No alert. No visual detection. Olivia lowered the rifle. Her hand stayed steady. Extraction came just before 0300. They moved fast. No voice calls, just hand signals and the soft sound of boots over stone. The Chinook returned in blackout. They boarded and lifted off, the compound shrinking into shadow behind them. Back at base, Colonel Reeve waited near the flight line. He said nothing at first, only nodded once as Olivia stepped off the ramp. Then he opened a wooden box and held it out. Inside was a single silver medallion, engraved with a flame and 3 peaks, 12 ever awarded. Reeve said quietly, "You're number 12. Olivia closed the lid and nodded. It wasn't pride that rose, it was clarity. The hush wasn't something you chased, it was something you carried. The helicopter touched down at Fort Elk Shadow just after 0645. The sun had barely cleared the ridgeline, casting long shadows over the gravel lot. Olivia stepped off the bird in full kit, boots dusty from the Afghan highlands. She moved like someone who had finished something and wasn't trying to explain it. Colonel Reeve met her near the hangar, his hands behind his back. His uniform was sharp, but his eyes were tired in that quiet, familiar way. They didn't salute. They just stood still for a second, both understanding what wasn't being said. Reeve spoke first. "You're cleared for 30 days off-grid. You've earned it. But if you're ready for something new, I have a slot open. Instruction and active rotation. Operator when needed. Instructor the rest. Legacy lives better when it's passed on than locked away. Think about it." Olivia didn't ask for time. She looked him in the eye and nodded once. "I'll stay." Her voice was level. No ceremony. Just fact. By the end of the week, she stood on range 12, watching the next batch of Ravenmark hopefuls line up along the gravel. 10 of them. Mixed backgrounds. Eyes sharp. Mouths faster. She wore no rank on her chest. Just fatigues and that old scope slung over her shoulder. The first half hour was drills. Movement under concealment. Observational cues. Most followed instruction. One didn't. A tall kid with a confident grin gave her rifle a glance, then looked at the scope. That antique still work. His tone carried the same kind of edge she'd heard 100 times before. Olivia didn't respond. She stepped forward and unclipped the scope from her rifle, then held it out. "Go ahead, take a look." He blinked, caught off guard, but accepted. He bent low, lined his eye up to the glass. A moment passed, then his expression shifted. The smirk faded, his shoulders straightened. He looked again, said nothing. She took the scope back and reattached it. The wind picked up along the tree line behind them. She pointed toward a set of targets along the ridge. "No electronics today, just instinct. Just air, just read it." The class went quiet. Not from fear, from attention. There was something in her presence that settled the noise without crushing it, the way Kessler had once done, the way her grandfather probably had long before that. By 09, EU0 rounds were being fired. Dust lifted from the impact zones. Olivia walked the line, correcting posture, nudging barrels an inch this way or that. No lectures, no speeches, only questions when needed, and when someone missed wide. She didn't scold. She asked one thing. What did the wind tell you before you pulled the trigger? That was the start of their education. Not with stats, not with digital overlays, with the hush, the way sound died when something important was happening. By noon, the recruits were sweating, dirt on their sleeves, scopes streaked with light from the angled sun. Olivia sat at the edge of the line, brass scope resting beside her. She didn't speak unless someone came to her. When they did, she answered in full. And when they didn't, she let the quiet do the work. The mountain wind kept moving, and somewhere between its shifts, a legacy didn't echo. It moved forward, quiet, steady, and alive.